Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Anthony Baxter. A look at some of the biggest global news stories for an international city, brought to you by the London Live News team. Tonight, a devastating loss of life. The UK and French governments are urged to rethink their approach to the refugee crisis after this week's disaster in the Channel. Well, it comes as authorities in Italy say luxury yachts are being used to smuggle people into the country. We'll be taking a look at the growing crisis across Europe. Not far from fiction, NASA launches a test mission to see if it could use a rocket to stop an asteroid from hitting Earth. And signs of hope for Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Marine experts say a mass fertilisation event took place this week as the natural wonder recovers from coral bleaching. All of that's come before 7:30. First, though, let's just start with the tragedy in the English Channel. 27 people died on Wednesday as they attempted to reach the UK from France. Their inflatable boat sank shortly after leaving the French port of Calais. It is the biggest single loss of life in the Channel on record. There were 17 men, 7 women, some of them pregnant, 2 teenage boys and a girl on board the dinghy. Authorities have denounced the smuggling operations behind the tragedy. Several arrests have been made by French police.
It's an appalling thing that they have suffered. But I also want to say that this disaster underscores how dangerous it is to cross the Channel in this way. And it also shows how vital it is that we now step up our efforts to break the business model of the gangsters who are sending people to sea in this way. And that's why it's so important that we accelerate, if we possibly can, all the measures contained in our borders and nationalities bill, so that we distinguish between people who come here legally and people who come here illegally. But we also use every power that we can. We leave no stone unturned to demolish the business proposition.
Boris Johnson there. Well, charities have urged politicians to alter their approach to prevent further loss of life. The head of the charity Refugee Action said the UK's tough stance on small boat crossings played into the hands of the people smugglers.
So people are forced to rely on smugglers. These are criminal gangs. The government are absolutely right, and they're criminal gangs, and people seeking safety should be protected from them. But they have no other options. You know, if you want to move across borders in order to be able to find safety and protection, because your lives have been destroyed in your home country, there are no routes. There are no safe routes. Very, very few people are able to resettle on formal programs. And we saw the Prime Minister saying yesterday that we need to show that the business model doesn't work. But the reality is the business model does work for the smugglers. And the government have said themselves that every time they bring in a tougher new regime on the French coast, it just makes the smugglers move somewhere else and try another even more dangerous route. First of all, we need a complete change in the narrative. It's incredible that after yesterday's appalling tragedy, the government, the UK government and the French government are still using the same template of we need to take action, we need to enforce action, we need to enforce our borders. And there's still no mention of the actual people themselves and the reasons why they flee and the fact that there are no safe routes. So the first thing that we would like to see is a commitment to a set of viable, safe routes into this country. And that means a commitment to at least 10,000 resettlement places a year from a range of countries across the world, not just from one particular country.
Well, let's just stay with this story for now. The MP for Dover and Deal, Natalie Elphicke, questioned why more wasn't done to stop the refugees from setting off from the French coast.
Rather disappointingly, yesterday we saw the French police in footage standing by while boats got together, migrants got in them, and they went off to shore in France. And nothing was done, and there was a child on board in that particular crossing. It's absolutely vital that the French police stop the boats leaving in the first place. That's the best way to keep people safe. Britain has offered to help with people and resources, and I hope the French will now take up that offer and other European countries will come to France's aid. We need to work together to bring an end to the small boats crossings and prevent more loss of life.
Despite the tragedy, crossings and attempts continued almost immediately. Amid deteriorating weather conditions, several suspected refugees were brought ashore in Dover early on Thursday morning after being rescued by the RNLI. Right, to the American state of Wisconsin next, and vigils have been taking place almost a week since 6 people were killed after being hit by a car during a Christmas parade. It happened last Sunday in the city of Waukesha on the outskirts of Milwaukee. Well, dozens more people were injured in what police believe was a deliberate attack. A 39-year-old man has been charged. Let's just hear now from Sean Riley, who is the city's mayor.
This is a parade. It's been around pretty much as long as I have. It's almost 6 decades. It's 58. It's been going on for 58 years. I've been a little kid sitting on the curb when I was a little kid, and it is horrendous to know that something like that, one of our beloved traditions, was turned into this. This is something that every single police department will think of now and in the future, but this is random too. This is not like parades are being targeted or anything like that. So we need parades. As people, as a community, we need a parade. We know it isn't going to be easy. It's going to be time consuming. I mean, if you lost your mother, I'm going to tell you right now that next year on that same date, it's going to be a tough day. If your child is injured, it's not easy. It's not going to be fast. We know that.
Sean Riley there, the mayor of Waukesha. Well, on Tuesday, the man accused of driving the car appeared in court. Darren Brooks was told he faces 6 counts of murder and that at the time of the hearing, several more victims remained in a critical condition.
I wish to notify the court, sadly, that today we learned of another death of a child related to this case. We do expect a 6th count for first-degree intentional homicide to be issued or added, to this case. I can advise the court that I am aware, I've been made aware through investigators, that there are other individuals in critical condition. I think we remarked on the number of actual injured parties in our complaint. It exceeds 60 people.
Prosecutors also told the court that Mr. Brooks, who wept throughout the hearing, had been on bail at the time of Sunday's incident for a case in November in which he was accused of intentionally hitting a woman with his car.
I'm an old guy who has been doing this for almost 40 years. DA's office, criminal defense attorney, 17, 18 years as a commissioner, both in Milwaukee and now in Waukesha. The nature of this offense is shocking. Actually, the detail I was not expecting here today, that two detectives, not lay people, detectives, not only tried to stop this, but rendered an opinion that this was an intentional act. You're presumed innocent, sir, but that's what the allegations are. And I've not seen anything like this in my very long career.
Some of the stories from around the world this week. Investigators in Western Bulgaria are continuing to try and find out the cause of a bus crash which killed at least 46 people. Officials say most of those on board were tourists returning from a trip to Turkey. The vehicle hit a motorway barrier near the Bulgarian capital Sofia in the early hours of Tuesday. 4-year-old twin boys were among the dead. 7 people managed to escape and were taken to hospital, suffering from serious burns. Angela Merkel's successor was agreed this week. Olaf Scholz was announced as the country's new chancellor. He will head a 3-party coalition in a deal which has taken 2 months to secure. Scholz was the finance minister under Mrs. Merkel. His Social Democrat Party won the election in September. Climate protection forms a big part of the coalition deal. Now, possibly one of the shortest terms in office for a Prime Minister occurred this week in Sweden. MPs approved the country's first female Prime Minister on Wednesday, Magdalena Andersson, who who was the country's finance minister. She was sworn in only to resign hours later after her coalition partner quit the government and she failed to get her budget passed. Ms Anderson said she would hope to try to become the Prime Minister again as a single-party government. And the France and Real Madrid footballer Karim Benzema was given a one-year suspended jail sentence and a €75,000 fine on Wednesday after being found guilty of being involved in a sex tape scandal. The 33-year-old was convicted of attempting to use the footage to blackmail one of his teammates, Mathieu Valbuena. Mr Benzema denied any wrongdoing and his lawyers say he will appeal. 4 other defendants were also found guilty. Right, the stuff of sci-fi films next. NASA has this week launched a mission to try and see if it's capable of knocking an asteroid off a collision course with Earth, should we ever find ourselves in that position. Just to be clear, no deep impact scenario on the cards as far as we're aware. So this is DART, a spacecraft that blasted off on Wednesday morning from a base in California. DART, which stands for Double Asteroid Redirection Test, is on course for 2 objects about 6.7 million miles from Earth. Here's a scientist who can explain a lot more.
We're going to bump into this kind of, I call it kind of stadium-sized, like soccer stadium-sized asteroid that is in orbit around a body that is about 5 times larger. So that's what we're going to do, and then measure really the change of orbit for that secondary body. We will see that by just changing that orbit, by measuring that orbit change, we will be able to derive really the most important quantity, which is how much of our momentum got imparted onto that small body, which of course in a danger situation is the most important question. How much does it take to bump a rock out of the way given its size and speed?
Well, if the larger of these 2 rocks hit us, the large one is 700 meters across. It could cause continental-wide destruction. DART will attempt to knock the smaller rock off its orbit in September next year. The test costing the equivalent of £240 million. Some might say it could be worth it. The World This Week continues after the break. We're being told to expect a rush on Christmas trees this year. We'll hear from the boss of Europe's largest tree wholesaler, who is based here in the UK. Hello, welcome back. You're watching The World This Week from the London Live News team, a review of the main international stories that have broken over the last 7 days. Still to come before 7:30. Why a full moon triggered a mass spawning event in the Great Barrier Reef. It has given experts hope for its future. Before that, though, this week saw the funeral of Sir David Amess, the MP who was stabbed to death whilst holding a constituency surgery last month. Prime Ministers, past and present, were among the politicians at Westminster Cathedral to pay their respects. Sir David, who was a devout Catholic, was also honoured with a message from the Pope.
Commending Sir David's soul to the loving mercy of Jesus Christ our Saviour, the Holy Father prays that all who honour his memory will be confirmed in the resolve to reject the ways of violence, to combat evil with good, and to help build a society of ever greater justice, fraternity, and solidarity.
Well, the former MP, Anne Widdecombe, gave the eulogy, having been a friend and colleague.
He was a very close personal friend. I was godmother to one of his daughters. I knew the family very well. We stayed with each other. It was one of those friendships which occasionally get formed at Westminster. And so, I mean, it still has a great air of unreality about it. I think that's quite inevitable if you lose a friend suddenly in terrible circumstances. And we're all asking ourselves why. I don't think anybody can tell you why. Well, David, of course, was a practicing Catholic. He led the all-parliamentary group to the Holy See, met the Pope several times. The Pope has sent a personal message. Now, when you consider David wasn't a senior member of the government or anything, but I reckon that to the Pope, he was probably the most important person in Britain.
Ali Harbi Ali, who's 25, was charged with the murder of Sir David and also with preparing acts of terrorism. He will enter his pleas next month. Right, let's just return to our top story for a moment. The growing refugee crisis across Europe. As the disaster unfolded in the Channel this week, officials in Italy confirmed that they'd seen a sharp rise in people being smuggled into the country on board luxury yachts. Authorities say entire families are paying criminal gangs large amounts of money for passage from Turkey, having travelled there from Afghanistan, Iraq and Iran. The sailboats are less likely to be stopped by border patrols. Well, aid workers have dubbed this type of smuggling first-class crossings, but the boats are often crammed with as many as 100 people. Hamid and his wife Sakia decided to flee Kabul after the Taliban takeover.
From Izmir to Italy, we paid for each person 8,500 euros.
Well, they travelled with Hamid's sister, a lawyer, and her doctor husband and their 3 small children.
Because our life wasn't safe in Kabul. The Taliban came and I was a lawyer. I can't live in Kabul because I must leave Afghanistan. And in difficult trip, came to Iran, then Turkey, then Italy. 3 months we were in travel.
Well, hundreds of thousands of migrants have sailed across the Mediterranean to reach Europe from North Africa in recent years. Little attention has been paid to the Calabrian route from Turkey. The beaches here are littered with what locals have called ghost ships, sailboats which have slipped in undetected and then left stranded. Vittorio Zito is a mayor of a small town on the Italian coast.
Unfortunately, the traffickers, who obviously have no concept of human scruples, are now even squashing 100 people in each sailboat because these sailboats are emptied out inside so they can be crammed full of men. This kind of route that uses these sailboats, among other things, they are very difficult to intercept because even flying over you see a sailboat. When you see them in the port, you understand that they are semi-new sailboats, sometimes even new. Not a sailboat that would arouse suspicion, and you see 2 sailors, usually of Ukrainian nationality.
Some of the stories this week: anti-government riots broke out on the Solomon Islands, with roads being blocked and buildings set alight and looted. Among those targeted were a police station and the Parliament building. Large crowds gathered in parts of the capital. Demonstrators have accused the government of neglect. They're also angry with a political decision to align the islands with China rather than Taiwan. Australia promised to send police to the region to help prevent further riots. This is the moment an Italian fighter jet made a vertical landing on HMS Queen Elizabeth as part of a joint NATO exercise. The ship is currently in the Mediterranean. There are reports that Italy has joined the search for a missing British warplane which crashed into the sea last week after its pilot ejected. There is some speculation over concerns the plane and its technology could fall into the wrong hands. And this will be a welcome sight following the COP26 summit. Part of a decommissioned coal-fired power plant in Australia was demolished. 2 chimneys and a boiler house were levelled on the site in New South Wales. It's reported it will be turned into a new renewable energy power station. Well, staying in the southern hemisphere, the Great Barrier Reef gave marine experts hope for its future this week as a mass spawning event took place, triggered by a full moon. The World Heritage listed natural wonder of the world has been under threat from warming sea temperatures in recent years.
Last night's dive was absolutely amazing. There was just anticipation of the event going off, and there's a little bit of worry because we've heard of reports going off the night before. Had we missed it? Had we not? But very, very quickly, we actually started seeing coral spawn in the water. These tiny, tiny little mauvey pink balls slowly floating up, almost like a snowflake floating on air, but going up. It was the opposite. And then we're finding all these beautiful coral colonies just laden with these little parcels of sperm and egg. And just watching them for 20, 30 minutes, then all of a sudden they just erupt, kind of like a smokestack going up, but made up of tiny pink balls drifting up to the surface. It was an amazing evening, the dive. The Great Barrier Reef itself is such a unique ecosystem. There are coral reefs all around the world, but there's none the magnitude and complexity as we have on the Great Barrier Reef. So to have it actually spawn, and other coral reefs do spawn, it's still a unique event. So For me, the best way to explain it, there's nothing else like it on the planet. Yes, other coral reefs do spawn at different times of years, but the fact that it's the biggest coral reef on the planet reproducing, it means it's the largest sexual event on the planet. So on a world scale, it's absolutely significant and phenomenal.
Finally, not quite December just yet, but according to some in the business, this weekend will see the start of a rush on Christmas trees. Take a look at this. If you are getting a real one this year, chances are it will come from here. It's the largest tree wholesaler in Europe. It's a site near Newbury in Berkshire. 700,000 trees are sold from here each year. Now, experts say demand is expected to rise by 15% on last year because people are decorating earlier and also a shortage of fake trees.
If anything, we see people buying trees perhaps a little bit earlier than normal, and by the beginning of December the thing will have really got into full swing, and we expect the majority of people to be out looking for their real tree for this year. I think it's just a culmination of what's going on with Brexit and the fact that generally people have been struggling with COVID. People want to celebrate and they want to find something to enjoy. And I also think that with there being problems now with hauling goods from overseas, from Asia, there's going to be a lack of plastic trees, and that's for certain. And real trees are going to see the benefit of it.
Take a look at this one. This is a felled tree in the Kielder Forest in Northumberland, a 42-foot spruce. It's destined for Westminster. It will go on display outside Parliament this weekend. I'm not putting mine up just yet. That's all from the world this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again at 7 next Saturday as we continue to round up the biggest international stories for a global city. We'll leave you this evening with pictures from London Zoo, who launched their festive programme today. And clearly the penguins are hoping to be on the nice list.